Hello guys, this is your friend Itachi Fanfic 3.0 and we are back a new fanfic story which is What if Naruto time traveled 20 years into the past? Part 3. Let's start fanfic without wasting more time. The air in the forest grew heavy as Naruto faced the impossible sight of his younger self standing before him. The child version of him watched with wide, uncertain eyes, while young Itachi observed the encounter from the shadows, quiet and calculating. Time itself seemed to fold inward, pressing the moment into something sharp and delicate, like a glass thread stretched too thin. Naruto felt the world shift under his feet. Not physically, not dangerously, but subtly, like a tide changing direction. Something inside the flow of time had begun to react. He knew he could not stay here. Not like this. Not near the boy who would one day become him. Naruto rose slowly, keeping his breath steady, and took a single step backward. His younger self tilted his head, confused but drawn to the warmth in Naruto's expression. Naruto wanted to reach out, to reassure, to comfort, but he held himself still. Even the slightest touch felt like a risk he could not calculate. The younger Naruto lingered for a moment longer, sensing something familiar yet unreachable. But then, as children do, he simply accepted the strangeness and drifted away, back toward the village, back toward the narrow world he still didn't understand was lonely. Naruto watched him leave, feeling a deep ache in his chest. Itachi remained a moment longer. The prodigy's sharp intuition had caught more than Naruto wished. He had seen the resemblance. He had sensed the tension. But he said nothing. He simply turned and vanished into the forest, quiet as falling ash. Naruto was alone again. He exhaled slowly. The forest seemed unchanged, yet he felt as though he had disturbed its very roots. When Naruto began to walk back toward the village, he felt something stir inside him, an emotion he had not expected to face in this timeline. It was not fear of altering the past. It was not guilt. It was something deeper, something heavier. It was longing. Not for power. Not for victory. But for gentleness, for a chance to rewrite the small wounds that had shaped him before he ever knew how to heal. Naruto walked for a long time without thinking. Konoha unfolded around him in its younger, quieter form. He saw villagers who were still alive in his timeline. He saw faces untouched by grief, by war, by the hollowing losses to come. He felt like he was walking through a world of ghosts who had not yet become ghosts. Naruto drifted toward the outskirts of the Uchiha district, drawn not by intention but by instinct. The air here felt charged with unseen currents, pride, suspicion, hidden tenderness. This was the calm before a storm he knew all too well. He stopped near a small river that ran behind the district, a place he had never visited in his original childhood. Yet here it felt strangely familiar, as if the timeline itself was pulling him toward crossroads he had tried to avoid. The water moved slowly, reflecting the amber sky. Naruto watched his reflection ripple across it, an adult face in a child's world, out of place and out of time. Suddenly, the light bent across the water, not from the sun, but from chakra. A presence emerged behind him. Naruto didn't turn immediately. He knew who it was from the calm weight in the air. Shisui. He approached with careful steps, not hostile, not suspicious, simply thoughtful, as though he had been considering Naruto long before this meeting. He carried himself with that effortless confidence Naruto remembered from stories, from glimpses, from dreams of what could have been. Naruto sensed something unusual. Shisui wasn't curious about Naruto's identity. He wasn't here to interrogate or test him. He was here because he could feel Naruto's heart. The two stood side by side for a quiet while, watching the water move. Naruto felt the depth of Shisui's intuition wrap around him like a warm cloak. The man could sense emotions as easily as chakra. Naruto's thoughts drifted. Could he save Shisui? Should he? Would saving him alter Itachi's path? Or save it? Shisui finally spoke, Though Naruto heard no words, only an impression, a question resting gently against his spirit. It was the question of someone who recognized pain in another, even without knowing its origin. Naruto felt something tighten inside him. He realized that Shisui's empathy, the very trait that made him loved, was also what made him vulnerable. Naruto lifted his gaze from the water and looked toward the Uchiha compound in the distance. He could feel the storm building. He could feel the tension in the clan. He could sense the approaching fracture. It was all still a simmering spark. A quiet conflict. Not yet tragedy. But close. Shisui followed Naruto's gaze and understood more than Naruto intended to reveal. Like Itachi, he could see the shadow looming over his clan. But unlike Itachi, he still carried hope that the future could bend another way. Naruto felt the weight of destiny settle on him again. This was the moment time wanted him to reach. This was the point where choices mattered. This was the thread where fate could change, or break. The river continued to move, carrying reflections away. Shisui waited silently, giving Naruto time. Naruto closed his eyes. He knew the question now wasn't whether he should change the past, but whether he could bear the consequences of doing so. When he opened his eyes again, the world around him felt sharper, clearer. Shisui watched him with gentle understanding. And Naruto felt the future shift, just slightly. As if waiting for him to take the next step. Naruto walked through the quiet forest, feeling time itself pulsing gently beneath the ground, as though the world remembered the moment he had traveled from the future into this fragile past. The deeper he went, the more he sensed the delicate threads of destiny tugging at him, reminding him that every step he took here could fracture or strengthen the path of tomorrow. He remembered Jiraiya's face, that blend of confusion, concern, and unexpected warmth. It had taken strength not to tell him everything, but Naruto knew he must move carefully. The past was sensitive, like wet clay. Shape it carelessly, and the whole sculpture collapses. Yet something heavier than caution weighed on him now. A presence. A shadow. A memory from the future, that did not belong in the past. As Naruto walked, he felt a faint pressure against his senses, chakra as cold as winter stone. The type of chakra that burned into a man's bones and left frost in the air long after the one who carried it disappeared. Naruto's hands clenched. He knew that chakra, even 20 years in the past, its owner had no right to be here. For the briefest moment, Naruto feared something impossible, another time traveler. But the feeling shifted. Not a traveler, a remnant. A leftover echo of an event that was never meant to happen in this timeline. Something, or someone, was already corrupting the past. That realization chilled him more than any enemy ever had. He followed the feeling through the trees, moving instinctively, silently, the way only a man who had lived through the Fourth Great Ninja War could. He paused when the forest opened slightly, revealing a clearing drenched in dying sunlight. The air was still. Too still. Naruto felt a strange pressure in his chest, as if the past itself was warning him. And then, he saw it. A faint seal, etched into the earth in wild, jagged lines. Like someone had carved desperation into the soil and left their fear behind as ink. The seal pulsed with the same cold chakra he had sensed earlier. Not active, but alive. Waiting. Watching. Naruto stepped closer. His heartbeat slowed. Because the seal was something he recognized. It was a variation of a forbidden jutsu created many years after this time. A jutsu that should not exist yet. A jutsu that had nearly destroyed the future. Naruto knelt, studying the symbol, tracing its edge with a careful hand, feeling the bitter familiarity of it. He knew this technique. It had been used during the darkest moments of the future war. It had torn apart timelines, warped memories, and twisted people into versions of themselves that no longer belonged to reality. It was a seal linked to temporal interference. Someone, or something, was trying to rewrite this era without his knowledge. Naruto exhaled slowly, his breath steady, his mind sharp. He whispered to himself, not as a warrior, but as a man who was beginning to understand the weight of the world he had stepped into. So, I'm not the only one who changed the timeline. The moment he said it aloud, the earth beneath the seal flickered, as if reacting to his awareness. The air trembled. A faint ripple passed through the ground like the aftershock of a memory being disturbed. Naruto stood, alert but calm. Whoever had left this seal behind did not want to be found, not yet. But there was something else. A scent in the air. A faint whisper of familiarity. It hit him suddenly. This chakra belonged to someone he knew. Not an enemy. Not a stranger. Not a monster from a broken future. No. This chakra, cold yet deeply human, belonged to someone he had once called friend. Someone whose fate had always been tangled with his own. Sasuke. But not the Sasuke of this time. A future one. A fractured one. A version of Sasuke carrying wounds that had no place in this timeline. Naruto closed his eyes for a moment. The realization cut into him with a sharpness he hadn't felt for years. If Sasuke from the future was here. If he had come without telling Naruto. If he had engraved such a seal into the past. Then the danger was far greater than anything Naruto had imagined. Because Sasuke never acted without purpose. And Sasuke never moved through time unless something catastrophic demanded it. Naruto exhaled, his fingers trembling for just an instant before settling again. He knew what he had to do. This was no longer just a mission to fix one event. The entire future may be unraveling, thread by thread. Naruto turned back, ready to seek answers. But before he could take a single step, he sensed another chakra. Warm, gentle, familiar in a way that tugged at the deepest parts of him. He froze. Not in fear, but in disbelief. Because that chakra belonged to someone who should not be here at all. Someone whose destiny in the original timeline had ended far, far too soon. Naruto whispered a name he had not spoken in years, his voice shaking. Neji. The forest answered with silence. But the chakra remained. Real. Alive. And suddenly, Naruto understood. The past he had entered was already changing far beyond anything he had expected. And now, he was no longer merely fixing time. He was walking into a new world. One where fate itself no longer knew its own shape. For a long moment, Naruto remained perfectly still, letting the quiet forest press against him like a hand laid gently on his shoulder. Neji's chakra, warm yet disciplined, soft yet unmistakably sharp, lingered around him like a ghost refusing to fade. But it wasn't a ghost. He knew the difference. This chakra carried life, rhythm, movement. Neji Hyuga was alive here. Alive in a way he had not been for many years in Naruto's original timeline. For a heartbeat, Naruto felt his breath hitch. A wave of old guilt washed through him. Memories of a war that had taken so many people he had wanted desperately to protect. Neji had died in front of him once, giving his life so Naruto could continue fighting. Naruto had carried that memory like a scar engraved into his soul. He had sworn to never let anyone fall for him again. And now, this past gave him a second chance. But the feeling of Neji's chakra wasn't the peaceful, orderly presence Naruto remembered. There was something unbalanced in it, like a steady flame flickering under a sudden draft of wind. Something was troubling him. Something was pulling him toward Naruto, as if destiny itself had whispered in Neji's ear that the stranger wandering the past forest was more than he appeared. Naruto stepped toward the presence slowly. His heart wasn't racing. It was trembling. Not with fear, but with hope he wasn't ready to admit. The chakra grew stronger, clearer, and then Naruto sensed it approaching. Someone was moving swiftly through the trees. Precise steps, controlled breaths, the signature of a Hyuga clan prodigy trained to perfection even in his youth. Naruto braced himself. He knew what Neji was like at this age. Guarded, sharp, and unyielding. If Neji sensed anything unusual, anything threatening, he would not hesitate. So Naruto waited, letting the forest speak first. And then, the presence stopped. Not far behind him. Close enough that Naruto could feel the air shift, as though time itself had drawn in a quiet breath. Naruto didn't turn immediately. He allowed himself one more second of stillness, gathering the courage to look into the face of someone fate had once taken away. Then he turned. And there he was. Neji Hyuga. Older than the academy student Naruto had first met, younger than the man who had died in his arms. His features were calm yet alert, pale lavender eyes steady and penetrating. His posture was perfect, his expression composed. But beneath that outward stillness, Naruto felt a subtle turbulence. Neji spoke first, his voice level and controlled, yet carrying a question Naruto had no easy answer for. You are not from this village, and yet your chakra feels strangely familiar. Who are you? Naruto swallowed quietly. He had imagined meeting Neji again countless times, but never like this, never in a world where his own identity held the power to fracture time like glass. He considered telling the truth. He considered lying. He considered walking away. But Neji's eyes, clear, sharp, honest, made the choice for him. Naruto bowed his head slightly, not in submission, but in respect, in gratitude for a life restored by the miracle of time. Just someone who came here, to fix something important. Neji watched him with quiet scrutiny. His gaze lingered on Naruto's posture, his stillness, his presence. He was analyzing more than Naruto's words, he was reading him, the way the Hyuga always did. You speak as though you carry a burden, Neji said quietly. One that doesn't belong to this era. Naruto felt a faint ache. Of course Neji would see through him. He always had a clarity of perception Naruto admired, even feared sometimes. He nodded once. Yeah, and I don't want anyone to get caught in it. Neji stepped closer. Not threateningly, but with the deliberate calm of someone who had already sensed the edge of the truth. It is too late for that. Naruto looked up. Neji continued, his voice steady. The moment you entered this forest, the flow of chakra shifted. Fate responded. And now, whether you wish it or not, you have already changed something important. Naruto felt his heart tighten. Neji's next words were unexpected, but deeply Neji. If the burden you carry threatens this village, then you must allow me to help prevent it. Naruto's breath caught for just a moment. The future Neji had died protecting others. This Neji, alive, strong, unbroken, instinctively moved to protect again. Naruto looked into his eyes, feeling a quiet pain settle in his chest. He whispered, almost softly. You already have helped me, more than you know. Neji blinked, surprise flickering for an instant in his calm features. But before either of them could speak again, the air changed. A cold ripple passed through the forest. Too sharp, too sudden, too familiar. The time-distorting chakra. Sasuke's chakra. The same presence Naruto had sensed earlier. It flared like a distant lightning strike. Neji sensed it too, his body tensing, Byakugan instinctively sharpening. But Naruto shook his head gently. Don't. His voice was quiet, firm, filled with a weight Neji did not yet understand. This is something tied to me alone. Neji studied him for a long moment. Then, in rare softness, he spoke. Even a lone path touches others. If you walk it, you will not walk unseen. Naruto's throat tightened. This was Neji. Always insightful, always deeper than he appeared. And Naruto realized something important. If Sasuke from the future was truly here. If he had left a temporal seal. And if other destinies were already shifting around Naruto. Then he would need allies in this altered past. But for now, he needed answers. Naruto took a deep breath, the forest trembling faintly beneath the shifting weight of time. The past was not just changing. It was awakening. And somewhere, not far from them, the future Sasuke was moving. Naruto felt the tremor of Sasuke's distant chakra echo through the forest like a ripple on quiet water. It was faint yet unmistakable, the kind of presence that threaded itself into the air in a way only someone who had walked beside him for years would recognize. There was no aggression in it, only intention, sharp and cold, like the first edge of winter. Neji's attention was fixed on that distant pressure, his pale eyes narrowing slightly as he measured what the presence suggested. He didn't know the source, but he sensed the weight behind it, a strength that did not belong to this era, something too refined, too dangerous, too practiced. But Naruto gently raised a hand, a silent signal asking him not to pursue. Neji hesitated. He wasn't used to standing still when something unknown approached Konoha's borders. Yet there was something in Naruto's face, something rare and heavy, that made him pause. Naruto carried an expression that Neji could not fully read, but one that felt older than the forest itself. Naruto looked toward the distant chakra signature, and memories washed through him. Flashes of battles fought side by side, of painful arguments, of friendships tested and reforged. Naruto remembered the countless times he had chased Sasuke across half the world, refusing to let him break, refusing to let him walk alone. But this Sasuke was different. This was a Sasuke who had lived 20 years of struggle and forgiveness, of solitude and atonement. A Sasuke who understood the fragility of peace and the cost of protecting it. If he had come to the past too, then something impossibly complex was unfolding. Naruto inhaled slowly, letting the weight of that thought settle. Neji broke the silence first. His tone was steady, but there was calm concern beneath it. This presence, is it someone connected to you? Naruto didn't answer immediately. He turned slightly, meeting Neji's eyes with a mixture of honesty and restraint. Yes, and no. His voice held a quiet ache. He's from my world, but not from this time. Neji studied him carefully, and Naruto could see the gears turning behind those pale eyes, questions forming, conclusions being tested, a deeper understanding slowly unlocking. Neji wasn't simply curious. He was analyzing the flow of events, tracing the threads of fate the way only someone with a sharp mind and a wounded heart could. Then he carries the same burden you do. Neji said quietly. The weight of a future no one else here has lived. Naruto felt a sharp tug in his chest. Neji had always possessed clarity. Sometimes cruel, sometimes healing, but always true. He nodded softly. And he's here because of me. Or because of something that follows us. The wind brushed past, though Naruto barely felt it. He was too focused on the distant chakra that remained steady, unmoving, as if Sasuke were waiting, watching, measuring something important. Neji took a step closer, but not out of suspicion. His posture held something gentler now, a recognition that what Naruto faced was greater than any single clan, village, or destiny. If this man is tied to your arrival, then his presence shifts the balance of our world as well. Naruto looked away for a moment. He hadn't wanted this. He had come here to stop the disasters he remembered, to protect the people he had lost, to repair the fractures in time without creating new ones. But Sasuke's arrival meant time itself was bending in ways he hadn't foreseen. Naruto closed his eyes briefly, letting the truth settle. He's not here to harm anyone. He said finally. But he's here because something dangerous may be coming. Neji absorbed this silently, and for the first time, he allowed the faintest trace of unease to show. Dangerous enough to pull two shinobi through the fabric of time. Naruto sighed softly, the weight of that question heavier than any blade. Maybe even more than that. Time seemed to tighten around them, as though the world listened for what Naruto would say next. The forest held its breath, and Neji waited with the stillness of someone who sensed something monumental unfolding. Naruto opened his eyes. This isn't just about the past anymore. This is about something trying to change what the future becomes. Neji stared at him, expression unreadable. But Naruto felt it. Understanding, deep and quiet, beginning to dawn. Then whatever path this leads to, Neji said softly, you won't walk it alone. Not now. Naruto's heart trembled. Neji didn't know the life he had lived. He didn't know the battles, the war, the sacrifices. He didn't know the promise Naruto had made to protect everyone, no matter what. But still, Neji spoke as though fate itself had placed him here, not by accident, but by design. Naruto turned his gaze once more toward the distant signature of Sasuke's chakra, lingering like a silent flame waiting to be reached. He exhaled slowly, knowing the next step was inevitable. Sasuke was calling for him. Not with words, but with presence, with intent, with a shared history no timeline could erase. Naruto took a single step forward. And the moment he did, the forest seemed to shift, the world acknowledging that the reunion of two forces bound by destiny was finally beginning. Naruto moved forward through the forest with a steady, unhurried pace, each step deliberate, as though time itself was guiding his path rather than the ground beneath him. Neji remained behind, watching him go with a silent understanding that their shared conversation had changed something delicate and irreversible. The air grew still the farther Naruto walked, not because of any physical shift in the world, but because the pull of Sasuke's chakra became sharper, more defined, like a single thread calling him through the tapestry of the past. It carried a calmness that wasn't natural for this era, a calmness born only from someone who had survived too much, lost too much, and still stood unbroken. Naruto followed that presence until he reached a clearing where the trees seemed to part not by force, but by quiet recognition. Time didn't bend here. It paused, as if acknowledging that what was about to happen belonged to no ordinary moment. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. He felt Sasuke before he saw him. A familiar weight in the air, a quiet intensity, a presence sharpened by experience and softened only by acceptance. And when Naruto finally lifted his gaze, there he was, standing at the far side of the clearing, half shadowed, half illuminated by the fading light. Sasuke wore no anger, no hostility, only certainty. He stood with the composure of someone who had already made peace with the fractured edges of the world. His expression was unreadable in the way only Sasuke could manage. Calm, distant, and yet carrying a depth of meaning beneath the surface. Naruto felt the past and future collide inside him. He had imagined countless versions of Sasuke's arrival. But this one, this quiet confrontation in a peaceful past, hit him harder than any battle ever had. Sasuke spoke first. His voice was low, calm, steady, carrying no accusation, no blame. I knew it would be you. Naruto felt something warm twist sharply in his chest. Not pain. Not relief. Something deeper. Somewhere between recognition and regret. He stepped closer. How long have you been here? Naruto's voice was quiet, not wanting to disturb the fragile balance of the moment. Sasuke looked at him with a gaze that seemed to pierce through time itself. Long enough to see what you're trying to do. Naruto exhaled slowly. Of course Sasuke had understood. He always did. Sometimes even before Naruto understood himself. I didn't come to change everything, Naruto said, his voice barely above a whisper. I just wanted to stop what hurt the most. Sasuke didn't deny it. He didn't question it. He simply looked at Naruto as though seeing through every layer of him. Then Sasuke walked forward, closing the distance with quiet steps. His presence remained calm, but something in his eyes, something subdued and heavy, revealed a truth Naruto had suspected since the moment he sensed him. Sasuke hadn't come here to stop Naruto. He had come because he didn't want Naruto to face this alone. When Sasuke finally stood in front of him, the air between them held a depth so heavy it felt like time thickened around their silence. Sasuke spoke again. You think you're carrying all of this by yourself. Naruto lowered his gaze. Not in shame, but in a quiet admission. It's my responsibility. Sasuke's expression didn't change, but something subtle shifted in his voice. Something that bordered on frustration, softened only by familiarity. It was never just yours. Naruto lifted his head. Sasuke continued, his words steady, almost painfully honest. You think coming here fixes the past. But every past you touch creates another burden. Another consequence. Naruto felt the truth of that settle heavily in his chest. He knew Sasuke wasn't scolding him. He was warning him, protecting him, standing beside him in the only way he knew how. Naruto's voice was quieter when he finally replied. If we do nothing, the world we left behind. Sasuke cut him off, not harshly, but with the certainty of someone who had already made his decision long before arriving here. I didn't come to drag you back. A soft pause. I came because I made a promise too. Naruto felt that promise echo through him. Not spoken, not written, not sworn in words, but lived, through a lifetime of battles, reconciliations, and the fragile unity they had built together. Naruto looked directly into Sasuke's eyes, and for the first time since arriving in this era, he felt something shift inside him, something long buried being pulled to the surface. Sasuke continued in a tone almost too quiet to hear. If you're going to tear open the past, then I'm going to make sure it doesn't swallow you. Naruto's throat tightened. He hadn't expected Sasuke to say that. He hadn't expected Sasuke to follow him through time itself. He hadn't expected Sasuke to choose this path with him. For a moment, neither spoke. The clearing held the weight of a world that no longer existed, and the shadow of a world that wasn't yet formed. Naruto finally asked, "Why now, Sasuke? Why follow me?" Sasuke's answer was simple. Because I saw the moment you left. And I understood that you weren't running away. He took one more step, close enough that Naruto could see the quiet conviction in his eyes. You were trying to save us all again. Naruto closed his eyes briefly, overwhelmed by the mixture of truth and pain in those words. When he opened them, Sasuke was still there, still steady, still calm, still choosing to stand beside him even outside their own time. Naruto realized then, he was no longer alone in this past. And because of that, the timeline had already begun to change in ways neither of them yet understood.